Hey guys, Jordan with the Young Turks and TYT Politics. Hope you had a nice weekend. I'm in New York, was in DC over the weekend with others from the Young Turks. We were part of the climate change march on Saturday, and then on Sunday we had the first TYT rally in DC. Seems like at least over 100, maybe more people came out, viewers that I met, so it was an awesome time. I was a little busy also. In addition to the climate change march, I was able to break a fairly big story that is also very disturbing on Saturday. So let me give you the details. If you don't know, there was a lawsuit filed last year by Bernie Sanders supporters, Bernie Sanders voters, and obviously all people who donated to Bernie Sanders' campaign against the Democratic National Committee. They filed a lawsuit citing election fraud and wanting their donation money back. There were nearly 7 million individual donors who donated to the Bernie Sanders campaign. So that's a lot of money that they were asking for back from the DNC. And obviously they're citing that the primary was stacked against Bernie Sanders. The DNC did not follow through its expressed rules in its charter and bylaws that say the DNC will be neutral in the primary process. So the lawsuit looks for the money to come back as well as other damages for Bernie Sanders voters. They also also file on behalf of people who donated to the DNC. So it's not just people who donated to Bernie Sanders, but also people who donated to the DNC. So I interviewed Jared Beck last week. Jared Beck is the lawyer, or one of the lawyers for the plaintiffs. So he told me during that interview that in court last week in South Florida, where the lawsuit was filed, the lawyer for the DNC, his name is Brad Spiva, actually said, not that we did this, but legally, if we wanted to, we could do it like the old days, go in the back room, pick the candidate, smoke while smoking some cigars in a back room. If you watch that interview, I said to Jared, wait a minute. You seem like a good guy. I'm not questioning you, but that sounds crazy that the DNC would actually say that, like in public, that they could legally just pretty much choose the candidate, bypass the voters. So, did a little digging, and I got the court transcripts. So this is what was actually said in court, the transcripts. If you want the behind the scenes, I was out at a party on Friday night. I had a couple things to drink, so feeling good. And I then got this court document, which was over 100 pages. So being the passionate reporter I am, I hightailed it back to the hotel and I read through those pages. So in fact, the DNC did say that. So a lot of this is detailed. I just wrote a piece about this. It's on the Young Turks Medium page. If you don't know, the Young Turks has a Medium page. Me, Michael Tracy, others right there to complement our videos. So go check out my piece. It's on the Medium page right now. I just wrote it, just went up. So I go through some of the things that were said. So the DNC lawyer, his name is Brad Spiva, actually said, we could have voluntarily decided that, look, we're going to go into back rooms like they used to and smoke cigars and pick the candidate that way. This is what the DNC lawyer said to the judge. He did say, this is not what we did, wink wink, but legally, if we wanted to, we could go into back rooms like they used to and smoke cigars and pick the candidate that way. So, besides that, obviously, being very arrogant to say that, besides that being extremely tone deaf, that you would, at a time when the DNC is wildly unpopular, at a time when the Democratic primary party is wildly unpopular, at the time when there is a huge backlash and opposition by progressives, Bernie Sanders voters and supporters against the Democratic Party and the establishment for the way the primary went on, to actually publicly say that legally, if we want to, we don't need the voters, we'll just go smoke some cigars in a back room, is pretty astounding that this lawyer would say that publicly. So it also is very alarming because, the mainstream media that pretty much carries water for the Democratic Party and the establishment have said this whole time, oh, these Bernie Sanders supporters, They're crying about the rigged primary and all of this. They don't, they don't know what they're talking about. The primary wasn't rigged, and they need to just fall in line and unite. But the DNC basically is saying not only can this legally happen, but it begs the question: how is the 2020 primary going to be conducted? If the DNC lawyer in 2017 is essentially saying, if we want to, we could go smoke cigars legally, smoke cigars, pick the candidate in a back room, and legally there's nothing that can be done. The fact that that is the DNC's, it's the DNC lawyer, but the DNC lawyer is representing the DNC, so it's accurate to say this would be the DNC's position. By the way, I reached out to the DNC to see if they stand by what their lawyer said. I have not gotten a response yet, so I'm doing my due diligence, and I want to be fair to the DNC. Maybe they would say he misstated or he misspoke, and this isn't what we think, but they have not responded. I reached out this morning, so really begs the question about how is this process going to be conducted in 2020? How is this process, even though the DNC isn't running a primary, how is the 2018 elections going to be conducted if candidates from things like the Justice Democrats primary more establishment Democrats, will they be going in back rooms and smoking cigars to decide who the winner is? It's very scary, and I'm not being sarcastic, but it's very scary and alarming that the attorney for the DNC would say something like this. So a couple other things that were said in the courtroom that I thought were important for you to know. So the DNC's lawyer also implied that despite the DNC's charter and bylaws stating it must remain neutral during Democratic primaries, there's no contractual obligation to follow through. Quote, there's no right to not have your candidate disadvantaged or have another candidate advantaged. There's no contractual obligation here. It's not a situation where a promise has been made that is an enforceable promise, Brad Spiva, the lawyer, said. I'm not a legal expert. Maybe legally it's difficult. I think it's an open interpretation. But basically what he's saying here is like, yes, it's in our charter, it's in our bylaws. Debbie Wasserman Schultz at the time, who was the lawyer, was the DNC chair at the time, obviously was disgraced and had to resign. She went on national television many times citing, according to our charter, according to our bylaws, we are a neutral body. So what they're saying here is we're going to talk the talk. We're going to tell people that we're neutral and we don't have a horse in the race, but legally you can't hold us to that. So a judge ultimately in South Florida will decide if legally they should be held to this. But in the court of public opinion, if a party, whether it's the Democratic primary, the Republican Party, the Green Party, whatever, is pledging just from their gut, from their morals, from the point of view of fairness, that they are only going to be in charge of the structural process of primary elections, but they are not going to pick a candidate publicly, and they are not going to do anything behind the scenes that favors one candidate or the other. They could say all they want that legally it can't be enforced. But you want to know something? The people who are donating money, not only to the DNC, but to Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton for that matter, are doing so under the basis that they live in a democracy and they are donating to a process where one candidate or two candidates or three candidates or four candidates are going to put forward their proposals, their ideas, are going to get equal time on a debate stage, and may the best man or woman win. That's what an election is supposed to be. Obviously, that's not the way it works in our system, but that's what it's supposed to be. So to say, and mince words, there's no contractual obligation to do so is not exactly, the most comforting thing to hear for progressive voters, for establishment. Honestly, Hillary Clinton voters, by and large, they won't care, but voters on both sides should not be okay with the DNC saying, well, you can't hold us to it legally, right? So in one of the more strange passages from the transcripts, and again, this was all said by the DNC's lawyer in open court, he brought up baptism. He compared neutrality to baptism. Quote, you have a charter that says you have to be, where the party has adopted a principle of even-handedness. And just to get the language exactly right, that they would be even-handed and impartial, I believe is the exact language. And that's not self-defining, Your Honor. I mean, that's kind of like, saying, who's a Baptist? I'm a Jew, I'm not a Baptist, but I don't know what baptism has to do with anything. He went on to, Beck pointed out that the oh yeah, so he's basically saying well, who's a Baptist or religion is open to interpretation, so is the term neutrality. No, neutrality is a pretty straightforward term. It's not really that open for interpretation. So, as WikiLeaks showed, as other leaked documents and just common sense things showed, there was pretty obvious favoritism and stacking of the deck by the DNC against Bernie Sanders, and by extension Martin O'Malley and the other candidates who run. So neutrality, it's not really open to interpretation. Neutral is neutral. And by the way, the defense for the DNC is also alleging that the DNC's First Amendment rights are being impinged by this lawsuit. But if you're pledging to be neutral, if you're pledging not to have a say in who becomes the candidate, if you're pledging that you have no horse in the race, then you're really just forfeiting, as the DNC, you're by extension forfeiting that First Amendment because you're not saying anything. You're not making a speech or trying to sway an audience for one candidate or the other. So the whole that's like saying, who's a Baptist? Very strange. And of course, the Democratic Party, because they can't do or say anything without bringing up Donald Trump, somehow had to bring in President Trump into the equation. So basically, they made a comparison about President Trump and him during the campaign. So they said President Trump was also used during the DNC's argument. Spiva pointed out that when he was a candidate, Trump made a promise to build a border wall that Mexico would fund. So DNC's lawyer is saying it's setting a dangerous precedent to find the DNC guilty because they weren't neutral, and that they could be held liable because if you do pick Donald Trump, who pledged a border wall that Mexico would pay for during the campaign, well, can Trump supporters who donated to Trump during the primary, could they then sue Donald Trump for not following through on his promise to build a border wall that Mexico pays for? As I pointed out in my written piece, again, go to medium.com. Go to the Young Turks Medium page. I think it's, let me see here. Yeah, medium.com/the Young Turks. It's the first story up there. Well, that's like apples to oranges, because Donald Trump is an individual and he doesn't have any bylaws or charter attached to him, or ethics or morals, but he's an individual candidate who ran. He's not the DNC or the RNC, who has bylaws and a charter and pledged neutrality. So Donald Trump making a promise during the campaign, or any candidate making a promise during the campaign, no, they can't be sued for, or maybe they can be sued, but no judge would ever rule in favor of a disturbed voter who donated money because the candidate didn't follow through. That's called life. So this is a very strange argument for the DNC to make. But overall, I mean, that's just some of the most egregious things. But to think that in a court of law, the DNC lawyer, who again, the DNC at this time is pretty much at the most unpopular measure it's been in decades. The Democratic Party is at the most unpopular measure they've been in quite a while. So you would think they're going to be careful about how they put forward. You would think, well, actually, they probably didn't think anyone was going to cover this, because the corporate media doesn't cover things if it means progressives might look good. So largely speaking, this lawsuit has not been covered, and I acknowledge I just started covering it now. It's been going on for a few months. I was a little busy in Standing Rock and other places, but I haven't been covering it completely because I'm only one person and doing many things. But for them to think that they could just say this arrogant stuff in public, that really, really, legally they might think they have a point, but in the court of public opinion basically makes them look like 1920s style, like the mob, and corrupt politicians doing business in back rooms over cigars and cards, to think that this would go unnoticed is pretty tone deaf, pretty arrogant, and they're going to be held accountable for it. Because you, the viewers, you, the voters, you have made it quite clear you are not going to put up with this stacking the deck and rigging of our democratic elections. Can it be proven that machines were rigged? No, I can't prove that. But can it be shown that the primary process was rigged and that we didn't have, when they complained that, the progressives and Jordan and Jimmy and Glenn Greenwald and Michael Tracy, they gave us Trump. Well, maybe if you would have had a fair democratic primary process that put all the candidates forward and made the best win without the DNC basically choosing which candidate they wanted through setting the debate schedule a certain way and trying to get the media to do these hit pieces on Bernie Sanders and all of the things they did that really, really actively worked against Bernie Sanders, maybe you would have had the right candidate go forward and maybe we would have a different president right now. But this is about a lot more, to me. This is about way more than just the 2016 election and getting these donors their money back. This is about the future, right? You cannot have a Democratic Party, a Republican Party, any party, thinking that, okay, well, in an ideal world, we'll be neutral and we'll let the best candidate win, but when we feel fit, we'll just stack the deck because legally nobody could do anything. Legally, we can't be held responsible if we're unethical or lie to the voters or allow money to be donated when it's really not a fair fight. That's not an America any of us will want to live in. And it's not just for progressives, for more establishment people. Well, what if, for whatever reason, the establishment candidate gets the ire of the DNC or the RNC? So they decide, you know what, in this case, let's go with the underdog. I don't know if that would happen, but it's not just underdog candidates. You never know. This could be an establishment candidate that gets the Bernie Sanders treatment at some point, an establishment candidate that fell out of favor with the oligarchy. So this is for all politicians and most importantly the voters. We in America, if we live in a democracy, that means we choose our representatives, not the DNC or the RNC or any of these political bodies claiming to be neutral. We choose. So, and our choice and the way we choose has to be fair. And everybody has to have an equal chance. And the governing body cannot be stacking the deck and pulling the strings behind the scenes. So, to repeat, my story is up on medium.com. It has a few more details in there. Please share that story. Please share this video. I will do follow-up reporting on this because this lawsuit isn't going away. It could go to trial. If it does go to trial, that means potentially W. Wasserman Schultz could be called to the stand. So I will follow up with you on the developments. I don't know many other people that are reporting on this, so hopefully you'll stick with me and TYT Politics for the latest details. And again, you could watch my interview last week with Jared Beck, who is the attorney for the plaintiffs. That's up on TYT Politics. Thanks and have a great day.